never forget. Along with certain symbols, the words never forget became a slogan emblazoned on t-shirts, signs, and flags honoring the victim of the terror attacks of September 11, 2001. But for the Americans who were old enough to understand what was going on that day, forgetting will never be an option. As the events of 9/11 unfolded, it became evident that the world as they knew it would never be the same ever again. But as they sat by their televisions, watching in horror, powerless to change anything they were seeing, one small group of people was making a difference. On the tragic day of the 9/11 terror attacks, the passengers and crew of United Flight 93 prevented a major terror attack, an act for which they have been honored with a memorial near Shanksville, Pennsylvania. September 11, 2001 will be remembered for the great horrors that unfolded on that day. At 8:46, on a seemingly ordinary Tuesday morning, an airplane crashed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center, one half of the most iconic structure on the New York skyline. It was a shocking event, but one that could conceivably happen accidentally with a building that stood more than 110 stories tall. The initial shock, however, lasted only 17 minutes. As New Yorkers and a national television audience watched, a second plane appeared and crashed into the South Tower. This second impact was more dramatic, as the airplane's fuel ignited, sending a huge ball of flame reaching toward the sky. It took only seconds for the millions of onlookers to realize that this was no accident. The United States was under attack. Viewers across the world found they could not wrench themselves away from the televised footage. Audiences learned about the attacks in real time. Then, just 34 minutes after the South Tower was attacked, audiences learned of yet another attack. This time on the Pentagon, just across the river from Washington, D.C. This new target, a building a mere 5 stories tall and therefore much tougher to strike with a jetliner, allowed analysts to begin to guess at the symbolic reasons for these targets. For 40 years, the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center had stood as the tallest buildings in a city of skyscrapers. A center for international trade, the towers had come to symbolize the financial power of the United States. It was this financial power that the terrorists sought to target. Housed within the Pentagon are the offices of all 5 branches of the United States military, as well as the office of the Secretary of Defense. As a result, it was a symbol of the military power of the United States, and was targeted for this reason. Analysts had only a short time to make these connections, though. At 9:59 a.m., only 73 minutes after the first impact, and only 56 minutes after most Americans realized we were under attack, the extreme heat of the blaze caused structural failure and collapsed the South Tower. By 10:30, the North Tower also crumbled, leaving a gaping hole on the New York skyline. In less than 2 hours on the morning of 9/11, the whole world had changed. Worse yet, Americans had no idea if, when, or where another target might be hit. At the time, many Americans did not realize that a fourth attack was imminent. Earlier that morning, just 4 minutes before the first impact, United Airlines Flight 93 left Newark Airport. Like the other hijacked airliners, Flight 93 was filled with explosive jet fuel as it was headed on a cross-country flight. Authorities would later identify the 4 hijackers of this flight, all of whom were sitting in the first-class section of the plane, the section nearest the cockpit. Around 45 minutes into the flight, the hijackers acted. Although no one can say for sure, it is believed that 2 of the hijackers broke into the cockpit. Threatening to detonate a bomb, the other 2 hijackers corralled the passengers into the coach section toward the rear of the cabin. The flight recorders that were later recovered suggest that the pilots and some of the crew may have been killed immediately. With control of the plane, the hijackers made a sweeping turn and headed in the general direction of Washington, D.C. Interviews with terrorists later implicated in the planning of the 9/11 plot indicated that the intended target of Flight 93 was to be the U.S. Capitol, where Congress was in session. In keeping with their symbolic choice of targets, the Capitol symbolized the center of power for America's democratically elected government. On Flight 93, the hijackers locked themselves in the cockpit, leaving the passengers alone in the cabin. Several used the seatback phones to call loved ones and report the hijacking. Those who were able to get through learned for the first time of the other 9/11 attacks. The passengers quickly realized that their plane would soon be used as another flying bomb. Evidence from voicemail messages indicates that the passengers voted to storm the cockpit and force the plane to the ground rather than to let it be used to kill even more people. With the battle cry, "Let's roll," several passengers attempted to gain entry to the cockpit. Translations of the flight recordings indicate that the hijackers intentionally crashed the plane rather than to let it be taken back by the passengers. The hijacker pilot rolled the plane and dived toward the ground, upside down and at a steep angle. The plane crashed in a field near Shanksville, Pennsylvania, just 20 minutes by air from its intended target. There were no survivors. The violent crash created a deep crater and littered the surrounding area with debris. The passengers and crew of Flight 93 lost their lives on 9/11, but there is no telling how many lives were saved by their bravery. As the details of Flight 93 became known, people wanted to memorialize the heroes of Flight 93. Because of the investigation and recovery effort, ordinary citizens could not access the crash site. Initially, visitors left mementos on a chain-link fence nearby. Just over a year after the 9/11 attacks, President George W. Bush signed into law the Flight 93 National Memorial Act, authorizing both a 400-acre memorial and the preservation of 1,800 acres of surrounding land. While some controversy ensued over the specific design and funding was initially a problem, the memorial is now partially built and on track for completion. To mark the 10-year anniversary, a formal dedication ceremony was held September 10, 2011. This ceremony was attended by former Presidents George W. Bush and Bill Clinton, as well as by sitting Vice President Joe Biden. Then, as now, the completed portion of the memorial consists of the Wall of Remembrance, including 40 panels honoring the 40 passengers and crew of Flight 93. Beyond the wall, in a place visible to all visitors, but accessible only to family members, a boulder serves to mark the general area of the crash site. As time goes on, other features of the memorial design will continue to be added until the entire 400-acre memorial is complete. 40 groves of sugar maple trees native to the area will eventually be planted in honor of the heroes. Perhaps the most striking feature will be the Tower of Voices. Placed near the entrance to the memorial, the 93-foot-high tower is designed to be visible from the nearby highway. Described as a memorial in sound, the tower will be adorned with 40 wind chimes, so that each time the wind blows, the chimes will tell the story of the heroes of Flight 93. 9/11 was certainly a tragic day for America. It is important to honor those who died on that day, and it is equally important to honor the heroes, whether they were rescue workers in New York or Washington, or the passengers and crew of Flight 93. Remembering them is an honor. Forgetting them, well, that's not an option.